I've been a huge fan of Dapol over the years for their well executed and good value models. My Dapol Class 73 has been an exception, however, and is easily the worst Dapol model I've ever reviewed on this channel. After a couple of years sitting in the boneyard of my broken and poor running models, it's time to see if I can inject some life into this model and either bring it into service or finally show it the exit door. It's time to take a closer look. So thanks for joining today's video. We'll kick off by looking back at all of the things that are wrong with this model. We'll then look at any potential options to improve the model, and then look at what changes I chose to implement. After that, we'll review the improvements to the model and my final conclusion as to whether this model is worth keeping now. Okay, let's get into it. I first reviewed this model back in 2019, and it wasn't a pretty picture. Whether under DC or DCC, it would hesitate and stall when navigating points and diamonds. The directional lighting under DCC was in the wrong direction, where it was actually okay under DC. The cab lighting was always on, even under DCC, and this only served to highlight the lack of a driver. Both the cab and directional lighting can be seen to flicker, even if the locomotive is still running okay. The close tolerance of underbody detail in relation to the bogies could lead to some problems. And the main PCB and wiring is clearly visible in the windows. This model does have its positives though. It comes with a nicely rendered livery with a nice level of detail and has the look and feel of a good quality model. It is capable of some decent running once it warms up, and it has as good a level of power to speed linearity under DCC as I've seen from any model. The incorrect directional lighting can be fixed either through rewiring or by reconfiguring your DCC decoder. If you rewire, that will impact the lighting under DC, so the DCC reconfiguration is the only way to go. I've put the details in the comments for the changes required for both the Loksound 4 and Loksound 5 decoders to correct the lighting. The problem with the running performance has to do with poor power pickup from the axle mounted pickups that are located in the gearbox of each bogie. Running the model for a period of time will improve the running performance over time, but you have to do this every time you start a running session with this model, and it will still be vulnerable to stalling over point work or dirty track. There are two main options to address this particular problem. The first involves adding additional pickups to each bogie. The second is to invest in a Stay Alive power pack and a compatible DCC decoder. As I was already intending to add sound to the model and wanted to minimize the amount of time I expended on this model, I chose the latter approach. The Loksound 5 was an obvious choice, as I had enough information on that decoder to figure out the CV changes required to fix the directional lighting. If the worst came to the worst, I could always reuse both the power pack and decoder again, so my incremental investment wouldn't go to waste. I reached out to the good folks at Roads and Rails for a Loksound 5 with Legomanbiffo sound and a mega bass speaker, along with the Train-o-Matic SPP Smart Power Pack that was Loksound compatible. I already had a spare driver to fill the brightly lit vacant cab. Fitting was literally a 2-minute job, as Roads and Rails had already soldered the speaker and the Stay Alive pack to the decoder. The driver was also easy to add to the cab module that can easily be clipped out. So how do I feel about my upgraded Dapol Class 73? Well, I'm a lot happier with it now. Even without any warm-up time, the running performance is well up there, and the stuttering and stalling over point work and diamonds is gone. Both Radius 2 and Radius 3 performance is fine, and all of the point work can be negotiated without stalling either with or without a rake of coaches. The other point to make, I guess, is that this model did not have any derailment, and that still obviously is the case. The addition of a driver addresses the empty area in the lighted cab, and the directional lighting has been fixed with the CV settings. The Legomanbiffo sound is good, and on the visual appearance side the model has always looked good. My remaining two niggles are the lack of cab lighting control and the flickering of the cab and directional lighting, which appears to be related to connectivity between the main PCB and the outer shell containing the lighting. Its occurrence increases with speed, and the fact that we have the Stay Alive capability now means it's not due to segments of dirty track, for example. Replacement of the spring-loaded friction connector with a couple of plug connectors would probably do the job here. And with this would come the opportunity to wire the cab lighting off one of the auxiliary outputs on the Loksound 5 in order to address the cab lighting control issue as well. The Loksound 5 Legomanbiffo sound package already has provision for cab lighting control. So my final conclusion is that I'm happy with this model now. It performs much closer to what I would have expected out of the box. Addressing the remaining lighting issues will go into my to-do list, but I've seen enough improvement, particularly on the running performance side, to make this a keeper. Out of curiosity, I will likely try out this locomotive with one of the new TXS decoders from Hornby and the Stay Alive pack that Hornby are also delivering. This would make for a cheaper upgrade option, of course. Whether Hornby will publish enough information to make the directional lighting change, it remains to be seen. So finally, let's take a look at the scoring, or the relative scoring, between this model now versus what I would have scored it when I originally reviewed it in 2019. Now, my scoring scheme has changed since, so I've had to kind of adapt and migrate the scoring from then to the current scheme. So if we look at it here on the running performance, I originally scored this very low, would have been a 4 out of 10. With the upgraded model, I think you're looking up to an 8.5 out of 10. It's significantly better. It's got pretty good low speed performance, as you'll have probably seen, and if you look at the overall full running session. Overall, it's a much better running model than it was originally, and it doesn't need a rake of coaches to push it over the diamonds or the point work. It can run equally well on its own as it can with a full rake of coaches as well. So that's a major improvement, and that is the biggest improvement of all of these scores, obviously. Appearance and detail, I'm giving the same. It's not a bad looking model. It's a nice livery and a good level of detail as well, both in the upper body and in the bogies and the underbody. So an 8 out of 10, and that's equivalent. The sound, I'm giving an 8.5 out of 10 for the Legomanbiffo sound. I think overall it's a pretty good sound. There's probably one or two iffy sounds in there. Not too much a fan of the flange squeal, for example. But overall, I think it's a pretty good and solid sound package, and an 8.5 is a good score for that. Extras and variances improved slightly. We've got a driver in there now, and the directional lighting now works correctly. So that's what's giving us the extra point there. And then the build quality and packaging, I'm giving the same score. Originally, this was a packaging and documentation type score, but given that neither of these has really changed, I'm giving the same score for the two. Price value, I did pick this up originally for £80, which was very cheap at the time, but that wasn't particularly good value given it was a bad model. So giving it a 6 out of 10 score, I didn't score that originally. I didn't have a value score at the time. So I'm putting in that score now as a 6 out of 10. Whereas with the remediated model with the sound, I'm giving it as an 8 out of 10 value, £225 with sound included and with the Stay Alive capability, and this model now running as it does. It's an 8 out of 10 type value score, I think. That's a pretty good price for a model with the Loksound 5 based sound included. So 8 out of 10 now. So it's actually improved on the value front. So really we've gone from a 6.3 model, which I would normally pass on at that sort of score, to a model in the 7.8, 7.9 category, which is a very good solid score for a model. It's outside of the top tier models, which would be in the 8 and above, but it's still a very solid score for this model, and it looks a much healthier model now than it did originally. So my experience with this Dapol Class 73 has been turned around, and I'll have one less locomotive sitting idle in my boneyard. Its nice level of detail is now married with solid running performance and a good sound package, making it a locomotive I can now enjoy having on the layout, which certainly wasn't the case when I started out. It's still not quite the finished article, and that goes back to the initial flaws in its design. If you've owned any of the Class 73s from Dapol since 2017, what has been your experience with your model? Did it have running performance problems like mine? And if so, how did you improve those? Please let us know in the comments. As I mentioned, I have put some details in the comments regarding the changes made to the CV settings. I've also put in a link to the full running session with this particular locomotive, which actually looks pretty impressive now with the sound package and the improved running performance. I've just got notification that my Mark V coaches are on their way, as also is the Eastern set the TT120 set from Hornby. So expect to have both of those in the coming week, and we'll be reviewing both of those. So thanks again for joining today's video. Please drop a like if you found it of interest. I look forward to seeing you on the next one. In the meantime, take care and happy modeling.